Story 1. The Shadows of Wasatch. At 31, Ethan Carver was a man adrift, his heart shattered by a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. His fiancée, the woman he'd envisioned building a life with, had been unfaithful with his closest friend, a wound that left him reeling, questioning trust, loyalty, and his own judgment. Seeking solace, Ethan embarked on a cross-country odyssey, a pilgrimage to heal his soul through the rugged beauty of America's wild places. Utah's Wasatch Cache National Forest, with its towering pines and secluded trails, beckoned as a sanctuary where he could lose himself in nature's embrace and find clarity amidst the chaos of his emotions. Ethan had always been a solitary hiker, drawn to the quiet of uncharted paths where the world's noise faded to a whisper. The Wasatch, with its reputation for vast, untamed expanses, promised the isolation he craved. He chose an unnamed corner of the forest, far from the crowded trails buzzing with tourists and their selfie sticks. Driving his battered Jeep down a narrow, winding access road, he felt the weight of the world lift slightly, replaced by the thrill of adventure. The road ended abruptly and Ethan parked, stepping out into a world of emerald green in dappled sunlight. He checked his phone. No signal, just as he preferred. With a downloaded map and a mental note of his starting point, he shouldered his pack and set off, the crunch of pine needles underfoot his only companion. The trail he forged was no trail at all, just a path of his own making through dense underbrush and rocky inclines. His destination was a lookout point atop a nearby peak, a modest 3 or 4 miles away, but the terrain was unforgiving, slowing his pace to a deliberate crawl. Ethan relished the challenge, each step a small victory over the pain that gnawed at his heart. The forest was alive around him, birdsong weaving through the canopy, a gentle breeze stirring the leaves. For a moment he felt whole again, as if the wilderness could stitch together the pieces of his broken spirit. An hour into his hike, the sky darkened and a light rain began to fall, pattering softly against the leaves. Ethan cursed under his breath. Rain was his nemesis, transforming trails into treacherous slicks. Reluctantly, he turned back, retracing his steps with a growing sense of frustration. The hike, meant to be a cathartic escape, was now a soggy disappointment. As he neared the clearing where he'd parked, relief washed over him at the sight of his Jeep, until he froze, his breath catching in his throat. All 4 tires were slashed, the rubber sagging pitifully against the forest floor. Ethan's pulse quickened, a primal fear clawing at his chest. This was no accident. The cuts were deliberate, clean, and precise. Someone had been here, watching, waiting. He spun around, scanning the dense forest, but saw nothing. No movement, no sound beyond the rain's soft cadence. His mind raced. Without cell service, he was stranded, miles from help. The access road stretched back over 20 miles to the nearest town, a daunting trek on foot, especially with an unknown threat lurking. His only hope was the lookout point he'd abandoned, high enough to possibly catch a signal. Swallowing his fear, Ethan set off again, his senses heightened, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. The rain intensified, soaking through his jacket, but he pressed on, driven by a growing sense of urgency. Halfway to the summit, a faint rustling broke the rhythm of the rain, coming from behind him, maybe 40 yards back. It started and stopped in sync with his movements, a chilling mimicry that sent a shiver down his spine. He didn't dare look back, instead quickening his pace, his boots slipping on the wet earth. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to dance with menace. The rustling grew closer, more persistent, and Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. He risked a glance over his shoulder, seeing nothing but the endless sea of trees. Yet the feeling of being watched was inescapable, a weight pressing against his back. At last he reached the peak, his lungs burning, and by some miracle, his phone pinged with a single bar of service. He dialed 911, his voice trembling as he reported the slashed tires and the suspicion that he was being followed. He mentioned his AAA membership, a lifeline in this nightmare. The operator promised help, and Ethan hung up, relief tempered by the daunting task ahead. Descending through the darkening forest, evading whatever or whoever was out there. He couldn't retrace his steps. The direct path felt like a trap. Instead, he plotted a semicircular route, hoping to outmaneuver his pursuers. The forest was now a labyrinth of shadows, the rain a constant veil obscuring his vision. As he moved, the rustling resumed, now accompanied by the snap of twigs closer than before. Ethan's fear spiked when he stumbled upon a makeshift campsite, logs arranged in a circle around a smoldering fire, evidence of recent human presence. His mind conjured images of cults, of rituals hidden in these woods, and the stories he'd heard about Utah's history with reclusive groups. The sounds grew louder, more brazen, and Ethan broke into a sprint, branches clawing at his face. A fleeting glance revealed a foot disappearing behind a tree, then another and another. 6 figures in white, their forms ghostly against the twilight. They were chasing him, their pursuit relentless, their intentions unknown but unmistakably sinister. Ethan's legs burned, his breath ragged, but he couldn't stop. The forest seemed to close in around him, a living entity conspiring against his escape. Finally, he saw his Jeep, and beside it, a police cruiser, its lights a beacon of salvation. Ethan collapsed against the vehicle, gasping as the officer approached. He turned to look back, but the figures had vanished, swallowed by the forest. The officer, a grizzled veteran, listened to Ethan's story with a grim expression. He'd already called AAA a small mercy, but his words chilled Ethan to the core. Utah, he explained, was home to the largest Mormon population in the country, and its remote forests often harbored woods folk. Reclusive groups, some benign, others dangerously territorial. The Wasatch had a dark history of cults, and Ethan had likely stumbled into their domain. The officer's warning echoed in Ethan's mind as he waited for the tow truck. The rain now a cold, relentless drumbeat. Why had they slashed his tires? Why the chase? If they wanted him gone, a warning would have sufficed. The questions haunted him, unanswered as he drove away, the forest's shadows lingering in his rearview mirror. Years later, Ethan still hikes, but never alone, and never in Utah. The Wasatch had claimed a piece of him, a reminder that some wildernesses guard secrets too dark to uncover. Story 2. The Wailing of Dudleytown. James Jim Hawthorne was no stranger to the call of the wild. At 45, he was a seasoned hiker, his boots having tread the length of America's great trails, from the Appalachian to the Pacific Crest. With over 75% of the nation's national parks under his belt, Jim had grown restless, the well-trodden paths no longer sparking the thrill they once did. To reignite his passion, he turned to a new obsession, scouring Google Maps for forgotten forests, unnamed swaths of wilderness where few dared to venture. It was a risky pursuit, but Jim thrived on the challenge. Armed with a downloaded map and a pack of homemade trail markers, bright orange stickers he'd slap onto trees to guide his way back, peeling them off to leave no trace. His latest target was Dudleytown Forest in Connecticut, a place steeped in legend and shadow. Abandoned since the 1800s, Dudleytown was a ghost town in every sense, its crumbling foundations and eerie silence the stuff of campfire tales. Stories abounded of strange occurrences, disappearances, unexplained lights, and whispers of curses, but Jim, a staunch skeptic, dismissed them as folklore. The forest was off-limits to the public, a fact that only heightened its allure. For Jim, the promise of solitude in a place untouched by modern feet was irresistible. As a New England native, the drive from his home in Vermont was a mere few hours, a small price to pay for adventure. He arrived at noon, the autumn sun high, ensuring he'd have daylight to spare. Parking his truck on a hidden dirt road, Jim stepped into the forest, his senses immediately assaulted by an unnatural stillness. Unlike the vibrant ecosystems he was used to, Dudleytown was devoid of life. No bird song, no rustle of squirrels, just an oppressive silence that seemed to swallow sound itself. It was as if the forest held its breath, watching, waiting. Jim shook off the unease, placing his first sticker on a gnarled oak and pressing deeper, his boots crunching on the leaf-strewn ground. The forest was a maze of twisted trees and overgrown paths, remnants of a town long reclaimed by nature. Jim's curiosity drove him forward, his mind cataloging the eerie beauty of the place. He imagined the lives that once thrived here, their stories lost to time. Yet the silence gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the forest's otherness. He placed stickers methodically, his only lifeline in this uncharted realm, and tried to focus on the rhythm of his steps. An hour in, the silence was shattered by a sound that froze Jim in his tracks. A low, mournful wail, like the cry of a wounded animal, yet somehow human in its anguish. It echoed through the trees, the only sound in the dead forest, and Jim's heart raced. He stood still, straining to pinpoint its source, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Could it be the wind? No, the air was still, the trees unmoving. A wounded animal perhaps, but the absence of wildlife made that unlikely. Jim's rational mind scrambled for explanations, but none fit. He moved away from the sound, the wail fading, but leaving a residue of dread. He told himself to turn back if one more strange thing happened, but his curiosity, a trait that had both served and betrayed him, urged him onward. As he walked, his thoughts spiraled. How could an animal be wounded here? Was there a hunter, unseen, stalking the same woods? The idea of a gunshot he hadn't heard seemed implausible, yet the alternative, that something else was out there, was too unsettling to entertain. Then he saw it, a tree directly ahead, its bark carved with strange symbols, slashes and gouges that formed no recognizable pattern. Jim's breath hitched as he noticed more trees similarly marked, their wounds fresh, the sap still glistening. This was no natural phenomenon. Someone had been here recently, and their intentions were unclear. The carvings felt like a warning, a boundary he'd unwittingly crossed. Jim's resolve crumbled. He turned, peeling off his stickers as he retraced his steps, his pace quickening with each passing minute. In the distance, he spotted something new, a dark opening in the earth, like a cave or a bear's den. Confusion turned to panic. He was meticulous. He would never have missed such a landmark on his way in. Then he noticed the stickers, his stickers, placed at waist height, not shoulder height as he'd done. Someone had moved them, deliberately guiding him toward the cave. The realization hit like a physical blow. He was being hunted, lured into a trap by an unseen predator who'd tracked him from the moment he entered the forest. Jim sprinted, his heart pounding, the silence now a suffocating weight. The wail returned, louder, closer, a banshee's cry that seemed to chase him through the trees. He didn't dare look back, but the sense of pursuit was overwhelming, the forest itself conspiring to ensnare him. Pulling out his phone, he prayed for a signal and miraculously found one. He located his truck on the map, orienting himself just as the signal vanished. The wail grew deafening, impossibly close, yet every glance over his shoulder revealed nothing but empty woods. After an agonizing 10 minutes, Jim burst from the forest, the wail ceasing as abruptly as it had begun. He dove into his truck, tires screeching as he sped away, the forest's oppressive presence fading in his rearview mirror. The experience shattered Jim's love for hiking. He tried to rationalize it, a hermit perhaps, playing a cruel prank with a whistle to create the wailing. But the logistics didn't add up. How could someone run and wail simultaneously? Why the carvings, the cave, the moved markers? Dudleytown had claimed his courage, leaving him with questions that lingered like ghosts. He never returned, and the forest's secrets remained buried, a mystery too dark to unravel. Story 3. The Reservoir's Secret for Michael Mikey. Russo, the sprawling property behind his childhood home in upstate New York, was more than just land. It was a kingdom of memories, a sanctuary where he and his friends ruled as reckless, invincible teenagers. The house, perched on a generous plot, backed onto a dense wood that stretched to a dirt road, beyond which lay the reservoir, a shimmering, forbidden oasis that had captured Mikey's heart since he was old enough to sneak through its chain-link fence. The reservoir was his escape, a place to smoke, swim, and dream, its waters holding secrets only he and his crew understood. His dad's basement man cave, stocked with beer and a pool table, made their home the ultimate hangout, a haven where parents rarely intruded, and the promise of adventure was always just a walk away. On a humid summer evening, with the sun still lingering above the horizon, Mikey and his friends Chester, Rick, Jasper, and Hassan were sprawled in the basement, the air thick with EDM beats and the clink of pool balls. They'd already downed a few beers, the buzz fueling their restlessness. Chester, ever the instigator, proposed a hike to the reservoir, a plan that sparked unanimous agreement. The woods were familiar territory, the trek an easy one, and the prospect of chilling by the water was too tempting to resist. Rick and Hassan grabbed a couple of beers for the road, while Mikey, pacing himself, stuck to water, his head already pleasantly fuzzy. The woods were still damp from an earlier rain, the ground slick underfoot, but the group pressed on, their laughter echoing through the trees. They crossed the fence through one of Mikey's many hand-cut holes, a rebellious badge of honor the Water Commission had long given up repairing. The reservoir stretched before them, its surface a mirror reflecting the fading light. They headed for their usual spot, a cliff on the near side where they'd spent countless nights talking trash and dreaming big. But tonight, boredom pushed them further. They decided to explore the far side, a less familiar stretch they called the beach for its smooth, sandy bank. The walk was longer than expected, the terrain uneven, but after 20 minutes, they reached the far side, the reservoir's ovular shape curving around them. As they settled in, Hassan froze, his hands shooting up to point into the distance. There, near the beach, a dark figure emerged from the woods, moving slowly toward the water. The group fell silent, their earlier bravado replaced by curiosity tinged with unease. The figure was dragging something, a large black garbage bag, its contents heavy, judging by the strain in the person's movements. Mikey's stomach churned. The reservoir had a grim history. Bodies had been found in its depths over the years, whispered about in town like ghost stories. The group exchanged glances, the unspoken question hanging between them. Was that a body? The figure reached the water's edge and knelt beside the bag, their actions obscured by distance. Mikey's mind raced, conjuring images of crime scenes, of secrets buried in the dark water. They were about to retreat when Chester spotted something worse. 3 more figures stepping from the woods. 2 dragged similar bags, while the third carried a kayak overhead, its silhouette stark against the twilight. The scene unfolded like a nightmare. The first figure loaded a bag onto the kayak and paddled to the reservoir's center, where the bag sank beneath the surface. He returned, repeating the process with chilling efficiency. Mikey's hometown, just 10 minutes from a city notorious for crime, made the possibility of gang activity all too plausible. The group stood paralyzed, their earlier excitement now a distant memory. Then, disaster struck. Mikey's phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the silence. He fumbled to silence it, but it was too late. The 4 figures froze, their heads turning in unison toward the group's hiding spot. Panic erupted. "Run!" Chester hissed, and they bolted, the forest a blur of branches and shadows. Rick glanced back, his voice hoarse with fear. "They're following us." Running through the woods was a nightmare, the uneven ground threatening to trip them at every step. The threat of pursuit, of what those men might do if they caught up, propelled them forward. Mikey led the way, his heart pounding, but the alcohol and adrenaline clouded his memory. The hole in the fence, their escape route, was nowhere to be found. They raced along the fence, desperation mounting, until Rick shouted, pointing to a glint of twisted metal just ahead. They dove through the jagged edges, snagging their clothes, and kept running, the snap of a branch behind them, a stark reminder of their pursuers. They burst into Mikey's backyard, collapsing in a heap, their breaths ragged. Hassan called the police, his voice shaking as he recounted what they'd seen. A squad car arrived swiftly, and Mikey braced for a lecture about trespassing. But the officers' focus was on the reservoir. They searched the property, and Mikey's blood ran cold when they found muddy footprints leading to his backyard fence. Footprints none of them had made. The police found no one lurking, but the discovery was a grim confirmation that they'd been followed. Days later, the police recovered 3 bodies from the reservoir, a story that dominated local news. Mikey and his family lived in fear, the knowledge that criminals knew their address a constant shadow. His mother reported seeing figures in the woods at night, once even spotting a camera flash, a chilling hint of surveillance. The incident was a catalyst for their move, the house and its memories tainted by what they'd witnessed. Years later, a news article about a teenager drowning in the reservoir brought it all rushing back. The police never made arrests, the case fading into the town's dark lore. Mikey still wonders about the reservoir's secrets, the tragedies hidden beneath its surface, and the night that stole his sanctuary forever.